You're on the District 202 board. You've been the interim
President, CEO, interim. Yeah.
Oh,
Past 5 months I was, and COO at the same time. So COO, I've been the COO since 2014, I want to say. They know.
So a lot of people know you, and I think a lot of people don't know you. So I thought what we could do is talk about who are you? How did growing up in Evanston, growing up as a black woman in Evanston, mold you, shape you? What made you become the leader you are? And then also talk about the why, and talk about what your vision is for the why.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Evanston. I'm the youngest of 6. My siblings were all born in Louisiana, and my mother, being a product of Louisiana as well, decided after she divorced her husband, my sibling's father, that she wanted to provide, just to give my sisters, my siblings, more exposure, more opportunity up north, right? So she was a part of that migration from the South. And this was during a time when you really, especially a single mom with 5 children at that time, that was unheard of. You never left, the South. And so she made a decision to leave Louisiana and come to Evanston. Well, Evanston was the only community up north that her husband had taken her to. And so she fell in love with Evanston. She remembers, and she often recalls, visiting for the first time in Evanston and standing on one end of the street and looking down the entire block and seeing the trees meet at the top. This was like in the 50s. Yeah, I think my mom was about maybe in her mid-30s. And then years later, she met my dad. She was working at the Evanston Post Office and worked with Jerry Sizemore, who's also very known in this community and happens to be my aunt. My aunt Jerry introduced her to her brother, and my mother and my dad dated for a while, and they had me. And we all grew up in the same house.
And where was it? What ward? What neighborhood?
When I was first born, she lived on Wesley in the 5th ward. I was too young to remember that. And then she needed a bigger place, and she moved on Hartree, right across from the football field. So that's what I remember. I remember growing up on Hartree. I went to Walker, and then I went to Chute.
And then ETHS.
I did not go to ETHS.
No.
No. So by the time when I graduated from 8th grade, my mother remarried. And my stepfather was from Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's where he lived. And all my siblings were either in college or married and had their own careers. So I was the only one still in the house, with my mom. And because of my age and because I'm the youngest, I had to go with her when she decided to marry and move with my stepfather. So I moved to Ohio as a freshman in high school. Yes. And it was definitely a shock to the system. I mean, first of all, you don't move a high schooler. Right? That's just not the right time to do that. But in retrospect, it was the best thing that happened to me. And I look at it as an element that helped nurture my leadership, as well as exposed me to different things and opportunities. So when I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, they started their high school years as a sophomore. So when I moved to Cincinnati, I had to go back to middle school for a year as a 9th grader. That freaked me out because my mind was on high school. So that was the first kind of shock to the system. But what it did, it forced me to just start thinking about where I wanted to be and what kind of high school I wanted to be at. And I'd always been interested in music. And so Cincinnati, Ohio, they have a very strong and top high school that happens to be Performing Arts High School. So I convinced my mother and my stepfather to allow me to audition for this Performing Arts High School. She's like, okay, but you really, I mean, yeah, you like singing, you like that kind of stuff, but you didn't, you hadn't done anything with that. And I was like, just let me, I want to do it. So she supported my vision and my dream. I went in as, with a minor in vocal music, but a major in technical theater. And technical theater, of course, is behind the scenes of a production. So that was interesting because that was the first time that I was exposed to providing leadership from behind the scenes, right? And I was a stage manager and one of their top stage managers.
And did you just slide right into your school? Like, how was it different culturally to your growing up in Evanston?
Yes, it was challenging. It was very difficult. I went into a school that already had their own cliques and breakouts and people that grew up together and went to school together their entire youth life, and here I am, a new person coming in. So I didn't just slide in it, but I was fortunate enough throughout my entire upbringing to have examples of very strong women in my family. So my mother was very supportive. My mother is my hero.
How's your mother your hero?
Because of the fact that she made a decision in the 50s to take hold of her own life while raising her family.
So her independence.
Her independence as a divorcee to a man that was in the military, and she made the decision and said, yeah, this relationship is not going to work. I love him, but this is not going to work. And I have 5 children, but I'll be okay. And I want more from my children, so I'm going to expose them to more, and that means moving away from the South, and that means moving out of the comfort zone of having my family around me. My mother still lives. She lived here. My stepfather passed away, unfortunately, when I was in college, and he, when that happened, she moved back to be close to her kids.
And how was it different? Evanston and the neighborhood that you went into?
It was way different. So I was so used to in Evanston growing up. Of course, in Evanston, I grew up in a very segregated community. But my school environment was integrated. But when we got on the bus, I came to my block and they went to their block. But I experienced teachers that looked like me in Evanston. My principal, Mr. Johnson, looked like me and cultivated, my development and nurtured my youth years. Same thing for Chute, my principal, Mr. Ruff, who I still have a relationship with. I could look at him and see a reflection of myself. That was Evanston for me. My teachers were that way. They knew who my mother was. My mother, during that time, my mother worked in District 65 as a teacher's aide. So all the teachers knew my mother. And all the teachers knew the children, all my siblings. So there wasn't really anything that we could do that we could get away with because we were deeply connected in the community. The difference in Evanston, even though Evanston has always been diverse. People talk about that, the joys of living in diverse Evanston, and still very much segregated. So I was exposed to people, adults that cared for me that were not from my family that looked like me. When I moved to Cincinnati, that was the first time that I came in contact with folks that didn't look like me, white people that were poor. That were extremely poor. They didn't really live on my block, but I went to school with them. I hadn't seen that. That wasn't what I was exposed to in Evanston. The white people that lived in Evanston were very well off, extremely so. Their homes were huge. They didn't live in trailer parks. It was just a way different experience. That was a culture shock for me because I wasn't used to that at all. Not being exposed to that and only growing up and living in Evanston in a very segregated community, then you think that all black folks live this way and that white folks all live near the lake and have big homes and mansions, and all black people are on welfare seeking assistance or are not educated in a formal way. And so that exposure in Cincinnati gave me a different perspective. In Cincinnati, my friends it was a mixed bunch. The thing about this is so interesting because in going to a performing arts school, the only thing we cared about was performing. All those other issues or being in a segregated community, that didn't run, through my perspective because the only thing we cared about was performing and arts and singing and dancing and music and all that. And it was a very diverse school, and it was diverse across the board, economically, racially, it was that way. Being that in Evanston, when we got on the bus, I came to my segregated block, but in Cincinnati, we rode the bus and there were some people that got off in worse places than I did, where I lived, that didn't look like me.
Did you grow up income-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you?
Well, as a single mother, as you can imagine, we grew up with 5 children. We were very low income and required assistance. So that's how we grew up. We grew up, in subsidized housing. We grew up seeking support. My mother worked, but she had 6 children to take care of. So she always worked. So no, it wasn't easy, but I didn't know that. So as a youngster, my mother never exposed the challenges of raising 6 children to her children. So I absolutely didn't know her struggles. I didn't know what it meant to be stigmatized as a single mother. Because again, my mother worked, she was known, she was respected. She raised her kids to be that way.
Is there something that, one lesson that you remember that she taught you?
So my mother taught me by action, by watching her. She definitely taught me that my circumstance didn't and would not dictate my outcome. So just because, we were being raised by herself, that it didn't mean that we wouldn't go to college, that she didn't have high aspirations for us, all of us, that she definitely didn't have low expectations, that we had to be respectful, that she was still very community focused. So even though she knew very few people, and the people that she knew she met while she was working, she made sure that they understood what her expectations were for her children. And if they saw us not behaving, then they had every right to let her know. And that they had every right to correct our behavior. And so my mother didn't allow us to wallow in self-pity. She made it very clear that she was a parent and she was obligated to take care of us, and that she would do that, and that adult issues were adult issues and children would not be exposed to what she had taken on as a parent. I mean, if I came home and the lights were out and we had candles on the table, it was a fun time for me because we had candles. I had no idea that she was stretching her paycheck. She was proud, graceful, proud, determined.
And so when you went to this art school,
then
you went and studied criminal justice.
Then I went to University of Minnesota. So I went from, everything is perfect in Cincinnati, we can all get along, we love dancing and singing, to the University of Minnesota, where reality hit me in the face. I experienced a gap year after I graduated. Again, the youngest of 6, my mother had probably spent all that she could spend, and by the time she had me, she was tapped out financially. So I spent a year working. So after graduating from the Performing Arts School, I came back here. This is where I wanted to be. So I came back to Evanston. I worked for a year, and I did my own research to try to find and figure out where I could go for college. And the University of Minnesota accepted me and offered me a scholarship to start in the summer. And I was a part of their Minority Scholarship Summer Program. It was called Summer Institute. So I was excited. It was the college that accepted me and offered me money, so I went. I had no idea what was in Minnesota, what Minnesota was about. I just knew that I didn't have money to go, and they were offering me money, and I knew that I needed a degree. So I participated in their Summer Institute program, became familiar with the university campus. So this is a Big Ten school, humongous, and met friends, and that was it. It wasn't until the fall, because the summer you hardly have anybody on campus. And then when the fall started, it was like, whoa, where did all these people come? And why can't I find my friends from the summer? There's just so many other folks that don't look like me that I can't find those that do. So that was another shock to the system. So luckily I did start. By God's plan, He made sure I started in the summer so that I could connect and build relationships and build relationships that would ground me to stay there. Because had I not done that, I probably wouldn't have made it. It was so overwhelming. Being in a classroom of over 1,000 students, and there's only 2 of you that look like you in this class. So I made a decision to stay there. And I also made a decision to find my community on campus. So I started working at the African American Learning Resource Center, which was just every college campus has one for affinity groups, where students go. And then I became the president of the Black Student Union. So I did that for the length of time that I was a student at the University of Minnesota. So I served as their president. But I definitely had to do that in order to keep my mind and to stay there.
How did you decide on criminal justice?
As I started thinking about it, my mother worked in District 65 as a teacher's aide, and she was always helping families. I mean, even when we barely had, she was always going through our closet, taking something out and giving it to another family, or bringing another kid home and feeding this child or whatever. And so my example of watching her through action, right? And she was always taking care of somebody. And I believe that as a college student on campus, especially being in Minnesota, I started seeing how minority people were being mistreated within the state of Minnesota. Minnesota was, during the time that I went to school, unprepared for the influx of minority people moving into Minnesota. Minnesota, very liberal in their resources, very liberal in the support services that they were handing out at that time. So we saw a large group of people, minorities, people moving in from Michigan, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, and so forth. And no sooner than they got there did they get caught up in the criminal justice system. And this was also around the time of the Clinton administration where 3 strikes was implemented. And so you saw, and I witnessed individuals that had come in as a new resident, might have committed some minor crime somewhere else, got caught up in the system, and all of a sudden had 30 years. And then I was just always passionate about, helping youngsters, especially juveniles, stay away from that system. So I thought that if I started focusing and measuring on changing the system through becoming a criminal justice, or it was actually sociology of law major that focused on criminal justice, that I would help somehow change the system. And what I realized is that during that time, during the process of going through and graduating from the U of M and then working for the state and working for the county, that I could prevent them, right? And my goal was never to meet them there, but I did. So I wasn't on the outside stopping them or figuring out what the issues were from the back end that caused them to become part of the system. I was just in the system when they showed up, right? So during that time, I realized I need to reset and do this all over. And this was during the time that I worked for Hennepin County, Ramsey County, worked in their gang task force, worked for the Juvenile Detention Center. Then I worked for Department of Corrections through the state of Minnesota. I had to shift my focus and say, my goal is to prevent them, to stop them from entering into this system. So then I actually became pregnant, which forced me to be very intentional about my career decision. And then I began working for like a community outreach program.
So when is this? What year are we talking about?
Around 97. So I decided to leave a very good government job working at the Department of Corrections from the state of Minnesota and work for a community outreach program. I stayed for a year doing that, had my son there, and then decided that I wanted to move back home. And he was a year old when we moved back.
And did you want to come back here to raise him in Evanston?
Yes.
Specifically?
Yes.
And so you raised him as a single mom?
Single mom with family around me.
Having worked in the juvenile system and having your own son who's a black boy and then a black man, how was that experience and what was it like?
It is very hard. It is very, very hard. It was probably when I was told that I was going to have a boy, I cried. Again, because of my career choice and my passion. My passion has always been to work with young boys. That I've just been drawn to them for some reason. So that was always my passion. And then having the experience of working in the juvenile justice system, when you see how they're being put through the system, or even how they're raised, or how they're perceived, and then you're told that you're going to have a young black boy, a baby, and it shakes you, right? Because even though I knew I was ready as a parent because of the wonderful example I had, and I had a supportive family to help raise my son, I was nervous about how society would treat my child. And so, we moved back here because I was very, and you'll hear me use the word intentional a lot, and I use it because I'm really purposeful in what I do. But I knew that my son's father and I would not be together. So we made that decision, and I came to peace with it. But I knew that my child needed male role models around him. And so I came back home, and my sisters were married. I have brother-in-laws that I call brothers because they've been in my life since I was a young child, and an older nephew that he and I are only a few years apart because he's the son of my oldest sister. And so my son needed that. I needed that in order to raise him in the way that I wanted him to be raised, in order for him to be supported in the way that I needed him to be supported. And he had men around him to really teach him what it would be like to be black in this society.
And did you ever find yourself having to defend him against issues of racism?
Absolutely. On many levels. I made sure that every year, this was something that I did when my son started school. I wrote a letter to the teacher. Every year I did that all the way through high school. And I said, well, here is my son, and let me introduce him to you. This is what I know about him. You will discover things that I don't know, but this is how I'm bringing him to you. and because I'm bringing him to you with high expectations, it is my expectation that you partner with me in his success. They needed to know, and unfortunately I felt I had to do this, that because I shouldn't have to do this, because I'm sure his white counterpartners didn't do this, but I had to share with them as a single mom, bringing you a black young man or young boy, that I have the same expectations from my child being successful as any other parent. So I had to defend him, and I still do, and I think it's just reminding people that being Black is complicated. There is no one set mold of what that means. We are so complex, as is everybody. And so my son, even though, again, the teaching that I received from my mother, just because he's a young Black man being raised by a single mom, and because that was how he was born, definitely was not going to dictate his outcome. And it's scary at times, and it's exhausting. I'm concerned for his well-being and his life, and even here in Evanston, thinking about that, because he's been stopped many a times for no cause, for no reason, and he gets frustrated because this is a place that he grew up in ever since he was a year old, so he doesn't understand. It's like, this is my community. I went to school here. I played ball here. People know me. They know, what, and I've never been in any trouble.
And now here
but I'm being stopped.
You're the president of the YMCA.
Yes.
And you are on the board of District 202,
Yes.
The high school. So talk a little bit about how you got here and what's your purpose?
Right. Nina, this is so hard, and some people may not understand this. I only know that I got here because my steps have been ordered. I mean, I've explained to you the ins and outs and where I've been and where I've come from and how I started and whatever. I never thought about ever being the president of any organization, let alone the YMCA. I wasn't a member of this YMCA as a youngster. This wasn't a part of my childhood.
Had you ever heard stories about the Emerson Y?
Absolutely. That's where my oldest siblings, that's what they knew about. They knew about the Emerson Y. They knew about Foster, which is now Fleetwood. That's where they went, to hang out. That's where they felt welcome. It wasn't this Y. So this was not in my dream, right? I knew that I was passionate about youth. I knew that I was passionate about boys. I knew that led me even before the YMCA to my work at the Boys and Girls Club in Chicago. So it just kept mounting up. And when I moved back to Evanston, I knew that I wanted to work in my community. I just couldn't find a job because nobody had openings. So it was very hard to find a job in Evanston. That's why I went to the Boys and Girls Clubs in Chicago. So I hated driving out of my community, working my passion in another space. I was fortunate and blessed enough to meet Bill Geiger at a school board meeting, because I've always been engaged in my son's schooling, and shared with him my dissatisfaction with the after-school program here at the YMCA. And then he said, well, when you're ready to work for this community and help, then give me a call. Well, he called me, and then that's how it started.
So what was your first position?
Vice President of Programs. And my steps have been ordered. I never thought I would be on the school board. I'm very much, again, going back to my high school years, very much behind the scenes. Never been a very public person. I like others getting the credit. And so that was an opportunity that came up, and a couple of people talked to me about it. And then I just felt like my voice was missing, or voice that I represented as a single mom engaged in this community. It's not there. It would benefit the community. And so let's see. When I finally said yes, because I decided at the 11th hour, before the deadline of when you had to make the decision, and I went into it stress-free. And people would often say, well, what's going to happen? What would happen? Or how would you feel if you lost? And I said, well, I'm not in it to lose it. So I'm going on my fourth year, my final year.
And do you see your role at District 202 and being the president of the YMCA, are they similar in any way? How are they different?
Well, they're similar because I believe the YMCA and Evanston Township High School are probably the two best places in this community where our communities collide. So even though I may not live on your block, I may come out and work out on a treadmill, and we don't know each other, but we know each other here. So it's very diverse, and it's the same thing with the high school. You may go to your neighborhood high school unless you're in the Fifth Ward where one doesn't exist, but then unless you choose to go to private school, we're going to wind up at the same high school. We're very similar in that, and in my role, because I have been so passionate about making sure that every child within our Evanston community gets the same opportunity to be successful, that's what I do here. That I expose opportunities and I take down barriers for the entire community of Evanston, not just for segments, but for the entire community. So that passion is the same way. It's just at the high school, it's, I get you from 9th through 12th grade, but here I get you from the cradle all the way to your transition years.
What are you excited about? What do you hope for this place?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited for our community because they're so excited. And for Evanston, I think this is just, it's great to be a woman leading this organization. And I'm excited for the YMCA because, this gives us an opportunity to go deeper and put more things in motion. Again, I've been here for at least 12 years, and I've been over program development. So I've built collaborations and relationships, and I've been able to provide access to more people to our YMCA, and I've been able to be more intentional about the programs that support what the community needs. And so I've been able to do that, but now I'm able to make those decisions more strategically from the very top. So it is definitely my vision that our YMCA, anything we engage in, anything that we touch, anytime we sit down at the table, that there's a positive outcome with that we're changing and shifting the conversation and the outcome.
And talk a little bit about the kinds of programs that are here for various age groups.
Yeah. So there's so much. There's so much. People always say, oh, your mission is so big and it's so hard. I say it's a blessing. We start as early as 6 weeks. It's childcare at that time. Yes, it's early childhood education. So we start preschool, and preschool as young as 6 weeks, infants. And so we're able to nurture and cultivate and change outcomes from 6 weeks on. When I first started, we were partnering with everybody under the sun. And now we're very strategic about who we partner, because I want our partnerships and our programs to support what's needed in the community and to change the outcomes in the community. So one being through District 65, we have a program called Y Readers, which started under my leadership as COO, and it's a literacy program that focuses on those that are reading at or below the 30th percentile. And so we're able to partner with teachers, with certified teachers. We just bring the program because it's been successful at other YMCAs, but we're not the reading experts. And so District 65 brings that, and we're in the school setting throughout the summer. It's a 6-week program. We do pre and post tests, and we've seen dramatic outcomes in stopping the reading loss that takes place during summer months. We have a Y Achievers program, which is also a signature program, and we're ranked in the top 5 in the nation with our Y Achievers program, and it's a high school program that promotes college or high school graduation, college graduation, and career exploration. So not only are we helping them graduate from high school, we're helping them through college. We have Metamedia, which is a free digital media space for middle school kids, and it is free and open to them. They have access to other things that we do. So we removed the membership barrier for our middle schoolers. We targeted on that group, with that group on purpose, because we knew that there were limited opportunities for middle school kids. After school, no one really wants to deal with them. We said we'll take them, and we created a space through a very generous donor the Sebring Lewis Family Foundation to allow us to do that. We have an aquatics program with swim lessons and the swim team and lap swimming, which is a part of membership. So the YMCA is a membership-based organization. So you sign up for membership, which we make sure that anyone that wants a membership can get a membership. And then you are able to access the swimming pool and the wellness center, which is our fitness center, and other programs and activities. We also have Camp Echo, which is in Fremont, Michigan. So that's our summer residential camp where over 1,000 youth participate throughout an 8-week program or time frame at Camp Echo. We have family camps that go on there, and just a lot of weekend getaway camps and so forth. And we have a residence. So we have 172 rooms that are single room occupancy for low-income men. And that has always been a part of our history, even with the Emerson Y. And so we're committed to that and providing that affordable housing in our community. For our active older adults, through our wellness programs, so they participate in our group exercise classes. Of course, they come and swim and use the facility that way. And they have created their own small community. So they celebrate each other's birthdays and go out on outings and do things like that.
So is your membership very diverse socioeconomically and racially?
So our membership, I would say, definitely reflects the community of Evanston. From every different dimension of diversity, we have that. And so we're trying to just do a better job serving all of them. As you can imagine, that's our challenge. That's a great challenge to have. But the fact that our mission is so broad, it allows us to do that.
What are some of the things you would like to see in the city, particularly for low-income people, for people of color, who may be sort of more, less often seen, less often heard, less often included?
There's so much, because as I started to say earlier, we are so different, and there's a perception that we all just need the same thing, and we don't. We live in a community that has resources, but for whatever reason, many may not know that they're accessible to them, or there are barriers, whether it's human beings that still have not changed their heart in how they provide service to this community, that create that barrier. So to me, it's very basic, and it starts with the human perspective. And so we have to first understand that even though we are blessed in this diverse community of living here, that we have people that need us for different things. And we have to first be open-minded to understand and listen to what those needs are instead of assuming that we know. I want Evanston to really start being honest and having these courageous conversations, and not push away from what it means to live in this community, but embrace it and say that we're not perfect, that we don't know everything, that we are missing voices at this table. And even pause when you enter a room and the room looks solely like you, or there's no representation of what Evanston looks like, and say we're not ready to have this dialogue because it's not reflective, or the topic we're talking about doesn't affect the people in this room. So let's just be honest, let's just be bold, let's just step out and say we can't have, I want to have it. I had good intentions on having this dialogue, but we can't have it without the voices that are being affected by the racism, by the systemic racism that we're experiencing in this community from many different levels. How wonderful would that be to push pause and say, yeah, we can find them. We can find them, we can build. We don't have to build this without their input. And I'm hopeful. As a matter of fact, I believe McGaw has started doing that work. Because McGaw YMCA wasn't always the welcoming place that we profess to be under the YMCA. The YMCA has always said we welcome everyone. McGaw YMCA wasn't always that place, but we've been and we are doing some work to make sure that we are that way and that we knock down those barriers that's preventing that, and that we do the work, the self-work that needs to be done to make sure we're putting ourselves in check personally first. So they participate in training with through equity and diversity and inclusion, and not only from the Y of the USA, so our headquarters, but also we take part in the local work, the local training and diversity, whether it's from the YWCA or through Cradle and Career, through Beyond Diversity. It's very important, and what I've communicated to my staff is that it's very important that we have that Y of the USA perspective, but we also bring it home and we understand the community we live in. And so it has to be a balanced approach of what equity looks like from the national level, but how it lives in this community.
I know that you are a person of extreme faith.
Yeah.
How does that guide your life and your decisions?
It guides my life and my decisions. It has made my work more purposeful, and I've connected. I've had relationships that have deepened my relationship with God. I've always belonged to some church or another, but it hasn't been until, this over the past few years that I've been, that I deepened my relationship with God. When my son started growing, getting older and moving into his adolescent years and young adult years, that God really started transforming me and positioning me beyond my comfort zone, and moving me into spaces that I didn't think I would be moved into. And then I just started trusting and believing that wherever He wanted me to be is where I needed to be. And whatever He needed me to say, I was going to say it. It sparks us to be more intentional. It is a voice. I hope that they understand and appreciate that I'm just being honest and being truthful and being very caring and trying to help those that He's driven me to help.
Is it a daunting feeling? Is it an exciting feeling?
It's all that, Nina. It's I get excited for the community first, because it stopped being about me a long time ago. I shared with my staff that if God had shown me the process to getting this goal, to achieving this goal, I would have backed out a long time ago. If He showed me some of the things I had to go through or would have gone through or did go through in order to get here today, I would have said, nope, not me. Choose somebody else, because I don't want to do that. But I'm so grateful that He doesn't show that, that He just gives you the strength that you need to get through it. I never knew that He would expand my territory. I think I'm serving families and communities. I think I understand better that in order for a youth to be successful and to be happy and to be prosperous and to have reached their full potential, you have to start. It has to be proximate. So you have to start with the family, and then in order for that family to thrive and be successful, the community has to be strong and supportive and listening and adaptive and all that. And so while my focus was, thinking directly about what I could do to pour into this child, I realized that I could be pouring everything I had into this child, but sending him into a society that didn't care about him. And I strongly believe that my work is purposeful, and along the way I've experienced certain things for a reason, and my hope and my deep desire is to use all that to elevate McGaw YMCA to the next level, because there's so much here, so much potential in our community. We have great, awesome staff here that are here because they choose to be here. And so I'm excited about the staff that are here, that are hungry, that just want this community to be better. They help me with my energy. They just feed into me and pour into me. And so that's exciting. I don't get caught up on titles. I appreciate being selected by our board. But I know my work is chosen. But I definitely appreciate being selected. And because I'm not a title person, I know my role and my responsibility is huge, and I know people are excited about this in the community and within our movement, our YMCA movement. But I'm more excited about what this will mean to the community and how I will be able to build leaders within this organization and outside this organization.